Wrestling can be a baffling thing to talk about on the internet, as well a lot of things are, because every once in a while you get hit with some argument that makes absolutely no sense to you, and it's one that you never thought you would ever have to talk about in your life. But alas, we've come to that point where there's some out there who think that wrestling now is more popular than it's ever been before, which is not true whatsoever, not even in the slightest. But here we are, because today, a big thank you to my supporters over on Patreon, such as Dakari Garmin, Mr. J, Ron Hawthorne, Minji Stray, Harry Flynn, and The Reflection of Perfection. Thank you so much for all the help, it really does mean a lot. It's easy to see why some people believe that wrestling now is more popular than ever before. Let's just look at this year's WrestleMania, which set a brand new attendance record for WWE that saw nearly 150,000 people in attendance. Not to mention that CM Punk broke the social media record when he returned to WWE, only to have his record broken soon thereafter by The Rock when he came back. And let's also remember that WWE touts that SmackDown is #1 in the ratings. However, all of this is some creative smoke and mirrors that really don't tell you the whole picture. For example, when they say that SmackDown is #1, that is specifically in the infamous key demo, a very specific stat that does not mean nearly as much as a lot of wrestling fans think that it does. Looking at you, AEW fans. Plus, let's also remember that this is a case of a big fish in a small pond, as Friday night ratings usually aren't that high to begin with. And to further put things into perspective, all we need to do is open up the ratings to the entire week and to the entire audience, and we'll find that SmackDown is nowhere near the top. And again, remembering that this statement is all about wrestling being more popular now than ever, then let's just look at the ratings for SmackDown in the year 2000. And we'll see that 5 million viewers used to tune in to watch SmackDown, which is about double what the show brings in now. But I know there are going to be some of you out there who need to claim that, hey, people have cut the cord and the ratings are down across the board for everyone. Well, that's true, but only kind of. And it also doesn't really matter as much as you think. Because, first of all, Nielsen ratings now include that of streaming services, so that's not an excuse. And as for getting rid of cable, well, SmackDown isn't on cable now, is it? And guess what? Back in 2000, it wasn't then either. And yeah, okay, ratings are not what they used to be, that part is true. However, the ratings dip for professional wrestling is way more drastic than it is for other programs. As I've said repeatedly on this channel, Last Man Standing, the show that had the time slot before SmackDown moved in, debuted at 8 million. SmackDown has never seen anything close to that. In fact, most of the time, it takes an entire month combined before SmackDown can even approach that, which might just be why Fox decided not to renew their deal with SmackDown and it's moving back to the USA Network. And moreover, when we look at other events such as the Super Bowl, well, their ratings are actually higher than they used to be, which again just leads to the conclusion that this conventional bit of fan wisdom that television ratings are down across the board really isn't quite as true as most people think that it is. And even if it was, it still doesn't change that wrestling is not more popular now than ever. Because if less people are wrestling fans now than before, no matter what the reason is, it still means that its popularity is a fraction of what it used to be. It's just simple math. However, you might argue that that's just television, and sure, millions upon millions of people is a way better indicator of how many people are watching, but I'm sure some of you are going to point out, what about that attendance figure? What about that record-breaking WrestleMania gate that we had just this year? Well, for that, I have to point out that that number is for both nights combined. Neither night 1 or night 2 broke 73,000 people in attendance. And sure, even divided, that's still a fantastic number, but we have to remember that neither night 1 nor night 2 managed to outdraw that of WrestleMania 32, WrestleMania 3, or even SummerSlam in Wembley. And this whole 2-night WrestleMania thing really only started during 2020, when they had another record of 0 people in attendance. So the fact that this record was set only beating out the past couple of years really isn't saying all that much. But okay, even with that, let's go back to a prior WrestleMania in Philadelphia during the Attitude Era, where most people say that wrestling was at its height. And we'll see that both night 1 and night 2, 72,000 in attendance is way higher than the 20k that WWE pulled at WrestleMania 15. And so even though it is true that most of the same crowd that was there for night 1 is the same people that was there for night too, and therefore they shouldn't be counted twice, it still doesn't change that 72,000 people is a way higher number than 20. So even though WWE only started playing to larger venues somewhat recently, what's the excuse there? Well, there really is none, as WrestleMania over the past decade has mostly outdrawn that of the Attitude Era. But that is only one event. When we look at the other shows out there, with a few exceptions notwithstanding, for the most part, attendance is the same for Backlash now as it was back then, and in some cases it was even higher in the good old days. But it's important to remember that this is still just one event, and it specifically has to do with those people who are there live in attendance. When we remember ratings, pay-per-view buys, and all the other shows that happen all year long, all the stats that show that more people were watching wrestling back then easily outweigh the one stat that we have that indicates now is a more popular time. And so, as impressive as an additional 50,000 fans in attendance might be, it pales into comparison to the millions that aren't watching wrestling at home anymore. Moreover, when we're talking about these attendance figures and a lot of these numbers, this does contribute to the idea that wrestling might be more popular than ever because, well, it's making more money than ever, as there are those in the industry who feel that we might be headed towards a renaissance or another boom period. But unfortunately for you, the fan, that's only true for us who work in the business. When we look at a lot of factors that all affect how wrestling is done today versus how it used to be done, such as deregulation in a lot of states, and also the internet being able to spread wrestling shows everywhere, we'll see that yes, it's a lot more possible now than ever for people to have a wrestling promotion of their own, put on a wrestling show of their own. And when we see that this has allowed for a lot more independent wrestling promotions to spring up all over the place, as well as WWE itself going public on a massive level, and well, Tony Khan having nearly an infinite supply of money, there's a lot more opportunity for people to make money in this industry that just wasn't around before. I myself am very fortunate to be able to work for an independent wrestling promotion. But just because there's more money in the industry, that doesn't mean that it's more popular. The numbers, the business is doing better, not the fandom. And more importantly, a lot of this boils down to recency bias, as people feel that something happening right now because it's fresh and exciting is more important than something that happened way back when, where the emotions have already worn off. Additionally, another issue out there is, well, people just not getting out of their bubble very often, as there are those who feel that since their little corner of the internet is talking about something a whole bunch, that means that the entire world is too. But that is not always the case, and quite frankly, it usually isn't. So, just because all of your little friends at school might be talking about wrestling more than they have been in years, that doesn't mean that wrestling is at an all-time popularity high. And with all that being said, where do you stand on this crazy notion that wrestling is somehow more popular than ever? Please let me know down in the comments, and be sure that you're subscribed to this channel, as it's a Thinking Fans channel. We don't have time for nonsense. And please give this video a big like. I want to give a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters and to you for watching, and as always, Dave knows.